Good morning again, and welcome to our legislative forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. This is the first one in a series of 3 for the 2024 legislative session, and our topic this morning is education. My name is Bonnie Boothroyd, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County, as is our timekeeper for this morning, Pat Higbee, who is playing an important role for us. Just a minute of housekeeping before we move on. If you could please check your cell phones and make sure your phones are on silent, that would be ideal. Thank you. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government, and our membership is open to anyone older than 16 years of age. Please join us. We can use your time, your talent, and your financial support for ongoing operations. Government serves best when it is open and transparent. Democracy works best when more people are involved. To learn more, please speak to one of our members or reach out to us through our Facebook page or our website. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current state legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislative session is underway. All Johnson County legislators were invited to participate. Representatives Hora and Sherman did not respond to our invitations to participate, and Senator Driscoll responded saying that she has a calendar conflict. So I would like to now introduce our legislators who are here for today. Our senators in order of seniority: Zach Wahls, District 43.
Seniority.
Yeah. Janice Weiner, District 45. Our representatives, again in order of seniority and then alphabetically. Dave Jacoby, District 86. Amy Nielsen, District 85, Elinor Levin, District 89, and Adam Zabner, District 90. We'll start the forum with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually. And we'll start, Zach, since you're senior, you get to go first.
All right.
Start with you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see all of you today, and thank you for coming out. Thank you to the League for hosting these forums, which are really important opportunities for our citizens to ask their legislators questions and for us to share an update about what's going on in Des Moines. I'm obviously incredibly disappointed that our Republican colleagues chose to skip today's forum, and it's a shame. They should be here, and you deserve for them to be here. In terms of what's going on at the State House, I know that I see we'll have many folks here to talk about the governor's proposal regarding our area education agencies. I would say that has been far and away the subject that I've been contacted about the most during our first few weeks at the legislature. During the pre-legislative period, I did a survey to folks who are on my email list. I think many folks in this room filled that out. The number one topic that I heard back from people before the governor launched this AEA proposal was about protecting access to abortion services and reproductive rights more generally. That's something that I had almost 90% of my respondents say was something that was important to them. And so one of the pieces of legislation that I'll be introducing next week is legislation to protect the right to contraception. This is something that is obviously incredibly important for Iowans all over our state and for Americans across the country. And as we see these rights be eroded across the country, it's incredibly important that we draw a line in the sand and say that we're going to make sure that we protect the right to contraception in our state. It's an issue that doesn't just affect people through a healthcare lens. It's obviously an issue that affects people's fundamental freedoms and their ability to live their lives the way that they see fit. And I think fundamentally, if you had to try to understand what's happening in Des Moines, I would say that what you're seeing is Republican majorities that are increasingly going after Iowans' personal freedoms. It's very difficult to watch. It's something that I know all of us on this panel oppose, something that I'm sure we'll be talking about more today. But I would say at this point, those are probably the two issues that I've heard the most about from my constituents and that I'm the most focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Weiner.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to the League. I would echo what Zach Wahls said. We know that Iowans are really tired of the extremes. And I stand ready to work with anyone who's prepared to focus on opportunity, on accountability, and on personal freedoms. We heard that the culture wars were over, but clearly that's not the case, at least from what we're seeing in subcommittees. We, as Senate Democrats, are focused on filing bills on protecting reproductive rights. We're going to roll out a package within the next week or so. We want to really make the governor sign up for summer EBT. We want to feed hungry kids. I filed another bill for free school breakfast and lunch. We filed bills for family leave, to clean up our water. We want to protect and further every child's right to an equal and appropriate education. And we will work with anyone who's willing to do that. I'm not seeing that right now. But what I really want to hear is what you have to say today, what you're interested in, and please never hesitate to reach out and contact.
Thank you. Representative Jacoby.
Well, thank you and good morning. I'll start with something positive. How about this weather? Oh my God, I've become my dad. That's what I talk about all the time. What I've been working on so far this session is eliminating puppy mills. And of course, we had that incident with over 120 dogs in southern Johnson, northern Washington County, some months back. I also spent 5 days off Wilson Avenue in Cedar Rapids looking for one of those lost dogs. She was gone for 51 days. She was a very smart golden retriever. But now she is at home with her foster mom, enjoying sleeping on the couch. But out of those 120-some dogs, we did lose 20 to 30 of those dogs. And then recently, last week, another puppy mill was busted in southern Iowa in Van Buren County. They were busted by the federal Department of Agriculture, not us at the state level. We need to step up in the state of Iowa to get 2 more inspectors and also have some enforcement on the rules that we already have in place. So I know we have a number of things to discuss today, and I look forward to hearing from you, but I do think it's time for Iowans to step up, and we don't want to be number 1 in puppy mills. So let's all get together and get rid of those dang things.
Thank you. Representative Levin.
Thank you and good morning. Again, extend my thank you to the League for hosting these amazing forums and to all of you who have come out and all who are tuning in virtually and those who watch it later when they can on their schedules. I sit on a lot of committees, and so my work already this session has been really varied, but one of the things I've been really diving into is some of the ways that some of the scholarship programs in Iowa changed sort of subtly in last year's budget, and then how certain bills would impact those scholarship programs again this year. Specifically, one of the things I really was working on this week was understanding a bill that would impact the National Guard scholarships, service scholarship. I also am working on bills in public safety that have been proposed by Department of Public Safety and the AG's office, and asking a lot of questions about whether there's any research or evidence that would support the idea that these bills would actually solve the problems that they're claiming to be solving. So the opportunity to ask those questions is incredibly valuable to me and quite an honor, to be frank. And getting to come here today and hear your questions and your thoughts and your ideas just really fuels the work we do. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nielsen.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. And I just want to say really quick before we get too far beyond it is thank you to everybody who helped out with our caucuses on the 15th. It was a lot of work and it was a lot of change, and so I really appreciate everyone that stepped up to volunteer and also everyone who attended. So, give yourselves a big pat on the back for that one. Very successful caucuses this year, in my opinion. So I serve as assistant Democratic leader in the House, and so I'm doing a lot of stuff that's a little bit more behind the scenes, getting ready for campaign season, because let's just get this session over with and get to the campaign trail so we can elect some more friends to the House. I look forward to your questions, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you. And Representative Zabner.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for being here, and thank everyone who has reached out already this session. I've probably gotten close to 1,000 emails about the AEA issue, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. I'm the ranking Democrat on the House Natural Resources Committee, which deals with hunting and fishing in parks, and I'm really proud to be working in a bipartisan way on legislation to increase access to the outdoors for people with disabilities. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with the Department of Natural Resources. It turns out they're doing a lot of things, installing features, bringing on a track chair to help access for people with disabilities, but it's been disjointed. It's hard for folks in the community to really find information about it or to be able to plan a trip. And so the legislation would make sure the department does a yearly or bi-yearly survey of where the accessible features are, and then really help do outreach to people and families with disabilities to make sure that they can find those features. And so I've been really proud to work on that. I have a really great relationship with the Republican chair of that committee, and he's been really invested in working on that as well. So it's been a great experience. Also this week, I joined all 36 Democrats in the House caucus filing legislation to accept the summer EBT money from the Biden administration. So this is money that passed at the federal level in a bipartisan way. Federal Republicans also supported it to make sure that students in the summer when they're not in school still have access to food. Our governor made the decision to turn down those funds, and I just think there's nothing more basic we could do than feed our kids, and it does get frustrating. I mean, this week there was a subcommittee for a bill to require teachers to sing the national anthem every morning. And it just seems like, I mean, I'm not bashing the national anthem, and I like it, but, if we're not doing the most basic thing, which is feeding our kids, I don't understand where they get the gall to introduce all these other ideas for what schools should be doing with their time.
Thank you all for your updates on matters that you're working on. It's good for us to know the kinds of things that you're spending your time on, and we appreciate your perception of what's kind of coming to the top for the whole group. We're now going to begin questions for, first of all, our organizational partners. We'll have some questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. We'll remind all people who are posing a question that we'd like to limit your questions to 1 minute. And please observe the time limit so that legislators will have more time to respond. Legislators, please limit your your responses to 2 minutes. We will appreciate that again so that everybody can have an equal chance to be heard. Our timekeeper is going to help us keep on track, and she will let us know when your time is about up and then when it is up. And when you get that notice, if you would please just finish your sentence, but not your paragraph, that would be really helpful. Thank you. I would mention that all legislators are welcome to chime in on answering any question that you would like to. We're not going to do a round robin for responses. So here, we'll start with a question from the League, and then we'll go to our other organizational partners. Here's the question from the League. And this question relates to the Educational Savings Account bill passed in the last session. A fiscal analysis by the Nonpartisan Legislative Services Agency initially estimated that the program would cost $106.9 million for its first year. Reports are that actual costs far exceeded this estimate. By the fourth year, when eligibility expands, the initial LSA estimate approached $345 million per year. Based on the current program, that estimate will probably fall short of the actual costs. How will the state finance this expansion?
Tax cuts? That's their idea, more tax cuts.
Yeah, the number of times the $1.8 billion surplus has been thrown around, I think it's been theoretically spent. I've heard it theoretically spent about 90 times in the past 3 weeks. We don't know. The answer is we don't know.
It's an open-ended appropriation.
And I think it's important just to be really clear about what they're talking about when they say the fourth year of this program, which is that the richest family in Des Moines can choose to send their kid to private school on the dime of the taxpayer. Every single wealthy family will be eligible. So even in the first year, we've seen over $80 million go to families who were already sending their kids to private school. By that fourth year, when even the richest families are eligible, we're gonna see the vast majority of the funds going to families who would be sending their kids to private schools anyway. And at the same time, obviously, we're seeing difficulties in providing the services that Iowans rely on, whether it's mental health care, whether it's public education, and so it's really concerning.
And in terms of the statistics that just came out, approximately only about 33% of those who opted into the vouchers had not already been in private school or non-public school. And of that 33%, 21% are kindergartners, which means because there was never any income limit on those entering kindergarten, which means probably a big chunk of those kindergartners would have already gone to private school. So it's a very small portion of folks who weren't already able to afford it.
Yeah, so just to be really clear, to answer the question was, how are we going to pay for it? And the answer is that Iowa Republicans are going to pay for their voucher program by cutting other state services, which include public education. That is how they are going to pay for it. Let's be very, very clear about that. And just following up on the point that Senator Weiner just made, 2/3 of the vouchers went to people whose kids were already in private school. We were told that this proposal was all about school choice. Right? We all heard that phrase a million times when the governor and her cronies were trying to sell this bill. School choice. Well, as the statistics show, 2/3 of the people receiving this voucher were already in a private or non-public school, which just illustrates what this is actually about from the whole time, which is about attacking and eroding faith in Iowa's public schools.
You're private citizens.
This is not the floor of the Iowa Senate, thankfully, which is why the press are here.
Somebody had their
Thank
Wheaties
you.
this morning.
I want to
Thank
limit
you.
them to 2 cups of coffee.
I'm good.
All right, let's move on to our organizational partners then. And we're going to ask them to come to the microphone and present their question. We'll start with Brady Shutt, representing the Iowa City Education Association.
Good morning. I'm Brady Shutt. I'm the president of the Iowa City Education Association. We represent over 700 teachers in the Iowa City Community School District. We also represent the paraprofessionals, and then through the Iowa State Education Association, our nutrition service workers, our secretaries, and our physical plant and custodial workers. So I want to thank the League, of course, for hosting this forum and for all of our friendly legislators for being here this morning. It is important for the public to have a chance to hear what's happening and to ask questions, so no, it's deeply appreciated that you are here. I have sort of a twofold question. One is going to follow up on the funding to ask about both SSA as well as the proposal on teacher pay that's embedded within the AEA. But then I also hope that we can, I know there's a lot of folks here who are trying to figure out how to be influential on these issues, and so maybe from your perspectives, in addition to the update on SSA and what you're hearing on teacher pay and maybe decoupling that from the AEA, what's been most helpful to you, or what can folks do that will help you fight against some of these proposals in terms of attending subcommittee hearings, writing comments, correspondence that you get? What's helpful as you go about this this work? So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brady. And I promise there's no more Nielsen kids coming through the school system after this last one.
We've loved having them, so.
I'd say all of it. All of it is helping, especially the letters that are going straight to the governor's office. You know, we've organized around issues. This is my 8th year there, and I've never seen the public input impact the progression of a bill the way the public input for this AEA's bill has impacted. So keep it all up. I mean, if you can get to a subcommittee meeting, that's great. But also, if you can send an email, that's great too. So.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she had to back down her initial proposal within what, a week?
Yeah.
Really shows the power of your comments. And I'll just say, you know, I had a conversation with one Republican colleague who told me he had gotten thousands of emails about this issue. And he said, you know, not a single one was in favor of the proposal. And he said, Adam, I know you didn't like the vouchers, but even on the vouchers, 15% were in favor. So, you know, that might be a low bar. But, you know, the fact that he hasn't even gotten one person in favor, I think was really powerful for him. And I think that's why we're seeing issues for this proposal in the House caucus. So
I think just so folks, obviously we're going to talk about the AEA issue this morning. We are also hosting a dedicated listening post tomorrow afternoon from 2 to 3:30 at the North Liberty Public Library, specifically on the AEA issue. We want to hear stories from families, from educators, from specialists at Grantwood AEA, which is our local AEA here. So all of you are invited. It's open to the public, press. It's open to everybody. Again, 2 o'clock to 3:30 tomorrow afternoon at the North Liberty Public Library. And in terms of what's actually just moving the needle, I think the fact that you have so many people speaking out, the fact that it's resonating with legislators, it's getting media coverage, all of those things are helping to demonstrate that the governor's proposal is half-baked and goes too far.
You asked about the supplemental. I believe the governor's proposing 2.5%. Does not, again, come close to meeting what schools need or keeping pace with inflation. With respect to the teacher pay, in part because of the source, in part because of what I've seen out of Arkansas, I'm skeptical right now. Because yes, I want to pay teachers who are starting more, and I want to make sure that those who are already teaching are adequately compensated. Not sure where they plan the money to come from. And finally, in terms of feedback, all of the above. And write to every single, this is one, often I respond to emails that come from my constituents. This time I've been responding to every single one. And any feedback we can get as well from parents and from teachers who work at the non-public schools as well. This is an issue on which we can all make common cause because it touches every kid, every school, everywhere in Iowa.
Well, the teacher pay proposal truly is socialism on steroids, because what it's doing is it's shifting money from us here in Johnson County to the smaller communities. Now, technically, that's what our school funding is supposed to do from border to border, but this proposal is just ridiculous in terms of taking more money that we would invest in our teachers, our schools in Johnson County, and spreading it across the state. As far as targeted advocacy, I'm a little grouchier than most. I received hundreds, if not thousands, of AEA letters. They're not targeted. They come to who it may concern or to 150 legislators. It is more effective to send it to individual legislators with a personal story than a copied page. Do not copy pages. I would rather see 20 words from you, how it affected you, either as a teacher or as a parent. And that's what we really need. We're on step 1 right now. This has a long ways to go. I was part of the meeting with the governor's office, and the out lies that her staff told us. Number 1, statewide, there's a war between school districts and AEAs. That is exactly what she said. There's an out-and-out war, and neither one are happy with each other's performance. The second thing was none of the school districts use the media services provided by the AAs. And last, they said the private sector would be more effective, especially in terms of child psychologists.
Because we have so many.
Apparently, she's not familiar with billable hours, but that is a challenge. So keep the advocacy narrowed, focused, and if you have relatives that live in rural areas, please ask them to jump in on the conversation.
Yeah, there were two things in the AEA bill that I was happy about. One was increased teacher pay. The other was, I'm just mentioning this so that people can maybe throw it at the bottom of their emails. It was the establishment of an instructional materials library under the Department of the Blind. We like that. We want that. Thank you. They've been asking for that. Teacher pay increases. When I was a new teacher in North Carolina, my mentor teacher, who'd been teaching for 9 years, was making the same thing I was because they'd been in a pay freeze for 10 years, so since the year before she started teaching. This kind of, all right, we're just going to suddenly jump to this new level and not take input from districts across the state and not consider where the money is going to come from. It's a press release with nothing behind it, in my opinion. I want to know how we're going to sustain this and how we're going to protect all the districts and the vitality of our local schools, not just say we're going to pay teachers more. Let's do it. Let's do it well. As far as advocacy ideas, I'm going to go real quick down like kind of a hierarchy. If you can show up to the Capitol, to a subcommittee, fantastic. That is number one. Not everybody can do that. Commenting, making public comment on bill drafts before they go to subcommittee is great. Not everybody reads those, but the people who do take them pretty seriously. Then I would say targeted emails. If you have the time to write your own email and send it to the folks on the subcommittee, your own legislator, that would be the next tier. But the volume of 1,000 emails, even if they all say the same thing, does have an impact. And so if that's what you have the time to do, if you only have the time to click that, that advocacy now button on whatever is being sent out, that is well worth doing. I would say directing emails to your legislator, to the members of the subcommittee, and to the members of the committee eventually once it comes out of subcommittee are the most effective.
Thank you.
You can still call us too. You can leave voicemails.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Next is Ann Rhodes, who is representing the American Association of University Professors.
Hi. I'd like to thank all of you for coming because I know you're incredibly busy and you have enormous time demands and you get weekends off, but you don't really get weekends off. So it's like a more than full-time job. So thank you so much for being here on a Saturday morning. The state appropriation to the University of Iowa this year is flat for the third year in a row, with the exception of some small targeted special appropriations. And the amount is $20 million less than was appropriated in 1999. In 1999, we were ranked 21st among national universities by U.S. News. Now we're ranked 93rd. And before you blame the Republicans, we had a Democratic governor until 2011. We didn't lose the House till 2016, didn't lose the Senate till 2022. So I've got two questions. One is why, and the second is what can be done?
Yeah, so 1999 is the year I was born. And I did make that.
Go home.
I did make that point on the floor last year when we debated the education appropriations bill, which is that we were literally, without even accounting for inflation, providing less money than the year I was born. And when you go and look at what that means for tuition for an in-state student, it is really a big deal. I think, if I remember right, the number for tuition in 1999 was less than $2,000.
Yeah.
At that time, about 2/3 of the funding for the university roughly came from the state, and 1/3 came from tuition. That has really flipped. And what that means is a really heavy burden on families. It means it's more difficult for Iowa families to make the decision to send their kids to college. It means that college is less accessible for families. And so,
if I could just comment on that to reinforce your point, Iowa in-state tuition is the 21st highest in the country, and Iowa's median income is 30th. So this puts a horrible squeeze on middle and lower income families, and forestalls going to college for a lot of people. So I appreciate your point.
So I have a petition going around to freeze tuition at the University of Iowa and properly fund our universities. Many students on campus have gotten engaged in this effort, including the student government, which has been really exciting, and it's one of my focuses this session, is to get students themselves and their families involved in this advocacy, because we can't just see every year more and more of the burden shifted onto students. That's wrong.
Except if you freeze tuition and there's no commensurate increase in state appropriation, you're going to affect quality.
Yeah, my point is fund the university from the state level, maybe don't fund private schools for the richest families in Des Moines, and make sure that our students can actually afford to access the university that's supposed to be for the people. So,
very briefly, I don't want to get into the weeds of who controlled state government when. Democrats had trifecta control, the governor's mansion, the state senate, and the state house for a total of 4 years over the last 20, from 2006 through 2010. During that time, we had the biggest economic calamity that had happened in a century, essentially, and so there were across-the-board budget cuts that affected the state appropriation to the university and every other state agency at that time. And since Terry Branstad came back in 2010 and Republicans took control of the state Senate in 2016, and they've had trifecta control since then, they are the ones who basically refused to reinstate the across-the-board cuts that were made, including that affected our state appropriation to our regents' universities. I want to be very clear. If Democrats controlled the Iowa legislature and the governor's mansion, they would not be another flat appropriation to the state university. We are a party that believes in the power of higher education. We believe in the importance and the ability of Iowa families, if they want to go to college at an affordable tuition level. And we know that the University of Iowa is one of our single most important economic drivers for the entire state. So I think that it's really important that we remember, as all of us who are here, this community really does go hand in hand with the University of Iowa. The university's success is our success, and our success is the university's success. You're looking at a group of people up here who all support the university, who all want to see more funding for the university, and want to make sure that our students are able to afford coming to the University of Iowa and get a world-class education.
Yeah, Bobby Kaufman never comes to these, so.
Bobby Kaufman no longer represents Johnson County.
Yeah, we have a few other Republican colleagues in Johnson County. I wanted just to add one thing, which is I know that the university, that President Wilson and the university and the regents proposed a program for the University of Iowa to support rural health. And that struck me as a really innovative and timely effort. And I was flummoxed that and all we're looking at right now is the governor's proposed budget, right? The governor proposes, the legislature disposes, so we don't know yet what's going to come out of our Republican colleagues in the legislature, but it would seem that given the healthcare deserts around the state, that would be a useful thing to focus on.
Yeah, I agree.
So I sit on the education budget subcommittee, and I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but every single Democrat who sits on education or education budget sub has an education background of some kind, has some education expertise. We're all educators. Some of the individuals who are assigned to the education budget subcommittee from the Republican side have a genuine, visible, and palpable hatred for higher education. We sit in subcommittees where, frankly, I am embarrassed by the questions that some of the folks who come in to present to us are subjected to. Our institutions of higher learning are drivers of opportunity. And right now, they are just trying not to get beaten down any further. It is incredibly frustrating, and it's wrong as far as Iowa's future. That being said, we have to keep making the case and pointing out what we could be doing with these institutions and for these institutions and for Iowans every single day and every single year with our budget.
I meant to add that you've heard about the thousands of emails that have come in on AEAs. We need something similar on higher education funding. We don't get it.
Well, I want to thank you. I know you're all on our side, but I got one question, and that was it.
Thank you, Ann. John, you're up next. This is Dr. John Spear from Grantwood AEA. Seems to be the topic of the week.
Good morning, I'm John Spear. I'm the Chief Administrator at Grantwood AEA, and I really have one question.
Get a
It'll be
little
short.
closer to the mic here.
I have one question. It'll be
Thank
short
you.
and sweet. John Spear, Grantwood AEA. Do you support, and I'll colloquially call it, the AEA reorganization bills that are in the House and the Senate? Do you support the bills, and why or why not?
No, it's a bad proposal.
No, I don't support bills that are written by outside consultants with zero consultation with stakeholders and local folks.
I'm trying to say no without using a word that rhymes with truck. But no, it's a goofy proposal.
No, because schools need support from their communities.
No, I don't support it.
No, my older brother is dyslexic and received services from the AEA, and I think he'd yell at me if I voted yes, so.
Okay, thank you. And next, we have Missy Forbes, who is representing the 4 Cs.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you all for your time this morning. Other than the AEA question, I was thought everybody was teeing up my my question. So I'm going to take it back to teacher pay and access and tuition. I obviously work in the through the lens of early childhood education, and we've made some pretty good strides in Johnson County with our wage enhancement program that we've implemented to give teachers that work in child care centers a $2 an hour raise. And we've had some movement on the state level with some state ARPA dollars to help subsidize that program using our county, our local ARPA dollars, I'll say. So it's time-limited money. I was wondering if, because I only heard one of you talk about early childhood education as a part of some of the work that you're doing. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir about how the importance of early childhood education to all of you. And so I appreciated your words about advocacy. I was wondering, my question is there any work in subsidizing in future years wage enhancement or teacher increase in teacher pay in that child care, the 0 to 5 teachers that do hard work, that are working with our future. We know that brain growth is the most rapid in those early years, and quality education is important to our communities for a lot of different reasons. Quality education in early childhood sets all of our children up for success. Blah blah blah. I can go on and on and on. So I'm wondering if there's any talk about it. We're collecting good data on how it's retaining the workforce. And we do have some success stories, but I'm wondering if there's any talk about that, if we can start that conversation and how that begins. So,
The big challenge we have is we are coming from different starting blocks. In other words, the other team likes to think that if you can have a 16-year-old watch unlimited number of 2 or 3-year-olds in a room unmonitored, that is helping with brain growth. So it's almost a battle that we're going to have the opposite. You've already seen a couple of bills proposing limiting counties' abilities to use their own dollars, not state dollars, whether it's wage enhancement or helping people that are struggling, that are working 2 or 3 jobs for a minimum amount of money a month for them to help pay for child care also. So I'm afraid the battle is almost inverse reverse. Their solutions aren't solutions that actually help, in my opinion, with brain development. So there's only one way it's gonna prove it to them, because their ideas don't work. They just don't. So I think your route is the way for us to go. Mainly let's leave counties and cities alone to develop their own methods.
First of all, thank you for the work that you do. As someone who is expecting my first child in the next couple of months, my wife and I started touring childcare facilities here in town, and we were, just blown away by the quality of the facilities that we were able to tour, but also struck by the fact that we needed to be looking at trying to find a place to put down a deposit when my wife was like 14 weeks pregnant. And we're not paying more for childcare than we are for our mortgage, but it's way closer than I would like it to be. And so it's an issue that is obviously very salient, especially for young parents and for young families. And so it's something that it's clear to me if you take a step back and you look at the big picture on this issue, the fundamental challenge that we have is that you have young parents who kind of by definition are not in their prime earning years, which are later on, trying to figure out how do you pay to support a system that is underfunded by the state, where there's a lot of turnover, to your point, which is why these wage enhancements are so important in the workforce, while you're trying to meet the kinds of ratios for infants or young children to childcare providers that can actually result in positive brain development for kids. And so, look, the answer is really simple. The state needs to put in more money into this because the market doesn't work otherwise, right? Now, I am currently working on, but have not yet filed a bill that would allow Iowans to use an education savings account to pay for childcare.
That's great.
I don't know if I'm actually going to wind up filing that bill. I know that Republicans wouldn't move it forward. But if we're going to be talking about making real investments into our education system, you've got Republicans saying that we should be, paying thousands of dollars to the wealthiest families in Des Moines to send their kids to private school. I don't understand why, middle-class Iowans here in eastern Iowa shouldn't be able to use those dollars to pay for childcare. So let's visit more about that because I want to get that right if we do end up moving it forward. But I mostly just want to say thanks for what you do. It's really important.
Thank you. And I would like to point out that a median family with 2 children does pay more for tuition to a child care center than someone pays to tuition at the University of Iowa. So I think that's worth noting that when we're talking about tuition, it's not just early childhood, or it's not just higher education, it's about early childhood education too. So,
Right. We increased, last year we increased marginally the federal poverty rate that someone could, up to which I think up to 165% was it, where someone could receive child care assistance. That needs to go up more. Wages, there must be wage enhancements because the governor has consistently used ARPA funds to fund expanded facilities, but a facility is not childcare unless you actually have childcare workers in there. 16-year-olds, unsupervised monitoring infants, I would never send a child there. I'm just like a year out from paying childcare, and my granddaughter who's sitting in the back corner right now is in kindergarten now, so I have recent experience with this. I put in a bill to roll back one of the so-called improvements that was made in the last couple of years, which can force parents who are on child care assistance to pay the gap. Instead, it should actually be the state paying that gap one way or another. I believe there may also be a bill moving forward that actually moves forward this year that has to do with expanded with universal pre-K. I'm not sure yet what that's going to look like, but this is not a system that works with the market. We've seen that in the rest of the world. We see how it's funded in Europe. The model here does not work. And finally, I'm filing a bill that will for a child tax credit that would actually that would more or less mirror what they did at the federal level for a while until they pick that up again, which would also help, I believe.
Thank you for your work on the wage enhancement. I think it works immensely well. I think it's important for the public to know that the governor used President Biden and ARPA's money for salary enhancement for her own staff. She used those dollars to illegally raise the salaries of her department heads and then fights us on wage enhancement for our child care workers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your responses. It's now time for us to move to audience questions. And what we would like to ask you to do or invite you to do is to come up to the microphone. We're not using index cards this time. We'll just have you come to the microphone and pose your questions. I would remind you that your question should be limited to 1 minute. All legislators will have an opportunity to respond, and we'd ask you to keep your responses to 2 minutes. Everyone's been so wonderful about sticking with the time limits today. That's great. Thank you.
Well, there is a women's game at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, that's true.
I appreciate Ann's comment that we're busy. We are, but we did carve it out to make sure that we had this afternoon for you.
Good point. Good point. All right, so I see someone heading to the microphone, so we'll start our audience questions in a moment. And it might help for others who have questions if you'd just like to make a line behind the microphone. We can move things along a little more quickly.
I wish to thank each of you for all of your efforts for the benefit of Iowans and for the needs that we all have. I'd like to also ask the question, being that guns are the #1 killer in the United States, what actions or efforts are being made to address this issue?
Thank you. When I think all of us were shocked, sad, and stunned by the news from Perry a few weeks ago, and we all had Republican colleagues who put out press releases offering thoughts and prayers, and that's just not enough. It's just not. Over the last 8 years since Republicans took trifecta control of the state legislature, they have steadily rolled back further and further and further the common sense protections on gun safety that our state had in place prior to 2016. And as they've done this, Democrats who have consistently voted against these rollbacks have warned over and over and over that the end result of this is going to be dead children. And unfortunately, that has proven to be correct. I introduced legislation just last week that would make a narrow reversal of one of those rollbacks, which happened a few years ago when Republicans ended the requirement for permits and background checks on private sales of handguns. That is just the most no-brainer reality. We absolutely should have a background check on every single sale of a handgun in this state. I can't tell you for sure that would have prevented what happened in Perry, but I can tell you for sure that's something that 90% of Iowans support and that Iowa Republicans should absolutely move forward yet this legislative session.
I think you will find that a number of Democrats are introducing common sense gun safety resolution. I have 3 bills that are in drafting. 2 of them have to do with gun safety and storage. One of them is a red flag law. I hold out zero hope that any of them will go anywhere this year, and it is still very important to make the point because we have to care about our kids more than we care about our guns.
Yeah, so, last session I was known to pick a couple fights on the floor of the House, and this year I thought, I'm going to come in and be a little calmer, and then the very first day of session we had a huge group of students from local high schools who had walked out calling on us for common sense gun safety legislation, and it's really powerful talking to them because it's just so hard for them to understand how this can continue happening and the folks with power can continue failing to act. Last year, Republicans in the House passed legislation allowing guns on school grounds and parking lots. Thankfully, it died in the Senate. But after we debated that bill and it passed, 2 of my colleagues, Dr. Megan Srinivas and Representative Ruth Ann Gaines, joined me in reading the full list of school shootings since Columbine. It took us over 45 minutes. It was extremely, I thought, powerful experience for me to just go through the weight of each of those school names. And at some point, 24 years into this issue, we have to say enough is enough. So like others up here, I've co-sponsored legislation I've, voted for amendments to that bill last year for things like universal background checks, red flag laws. And I just think we absolutely have to see action. And we should hold out hope. At the federal level, in the past couple of years, we have seen some bipartisan movement in the right direction. There is now funding from the federal government for states to implement these red flag laws, and we really should be taking advantage of that. And so I hope that what Republicans will learn from that bipartisan bill at the federal level is that it is popular and helpful to support common sense gun safety, and we need to do more. And I continue to hold out hope that we will take action before, we see another horrific tragedy in our schools.
And we're looking at action. I've asked for the Oversight Committee to take a look at the incident in Perry. And that's just to have the discussion. I mean, and there's things that we learn every day. But why can't a committee sit down and look through exactly what happened and what solutions could be derived from that discussion? You will notice that the governor posted last week that there was absolutely nothing that could have been done to stop the tragedy in Perry, Iowa.
In addition to co-sponsoring some of the more aggressive common sense policies that I think should be in place in Iowa, and recognizing the difficulty of passing such legislation now that we have strict scrutiny amendment passed in our Constitution. I'm also looking for narrow opportunities. So I will be on a subcommittee coming up next week. I'm mistaking my schedule, but coming up soon for a piece of policy that would allow gun dealers to offer safe, secure storage for folks who want to own guns but store them outside their home. It would be a voluntary program, but if there is issues with suicidal ideation in the home, if someone has children and no longer wants to keep their weapons in the house, I think small things that we can do like that have value. Is it enough? Truck, no. But those are things that we are having some conversations about and seeing an opportunity to work on, and that's helpful to me in my feeling of helplessness.
Thank you very much.
I would also say on this topic, please follow Moms Demand Action and Every Town for Gun Safety.
And I think we have an unusual ally on some of these related issues in the insurance companies.
Hello, my name's Alana. I taught in Chicago public schools and a true Chicagoan for 18 years, fed up, came here. I was delighted with the public education, 2 kids with a lot of needs, AEA, amazing. We've been slapped in the face left and right with all this legislation as an educator, and we're not able to really think about teaching. We are concerned, excuse me, about everything but the most important thing, is children. And we have to sustain and maintain our license, which every 5 years comes up. It comes out of our pockets to pay for these college education courses, which AEA did a great job helping us. Do they consider that to sustain, instead of the great exodus of all the teachers leaving? And do you think it's important to assist legislation and help people see things, statistics, or no, because the ideologies are just so different?
Winston Churchill, I think apocryphally, but apparently once said you can't reason somebody out of something they weren't reasoned into.
Right.
So this is not about what's reasonable, right? I mean, it sounds conspiratorial, but the reality is that most leaders of the Iowa Republican Party do not want Iowa's public education system to exist because they think that Iowa's public education system is brainwashing our children. That is what they think, right? Now, most people, like normal people, know that's not true. right? Regardless of whether you live in Iowa City or Sioux City or anywhere in between, right? So what we have to do is to continue to make sure that people understand teachers are not the enemy. Public education is not the enemy, right? And the way that we do that is by showing up and making that case publicly over and over and over again. And it's exhausting. And I am so sorry that Iowa Republicans are making you have to do that level of advocacy on top of everything that you're doing to serve our kids. It's wrong. It's just wrong. But unfortunately, that's the place that we're in today. You're absolutely right about the amount of disrespect. I can't think of a single other profession in our state where you've seen this level of involvement by, let's just go ahead and say it, extreme radical politicians in Des Moines who are just over and over and over taking away your ability to collectively bargain, who are trying to look over your shoulder and tell you how to do your job, and trying to to fundamentally make it impossible for you to actually do your job. And let's be really clear that that is an intentional strategy to obstruct our public education system and make it not work so that they can fund our taxpayer dollars to go to pay for their private schools who teach, and who, first of all, don't serve every Iowa kid, and who are allowed to teach much more radical things than what people are learning in our public schools. So that was kind of a rambly answer. But let me just say thank you for what you do for our kids.
Simply thank you to all our teachers, to all our paraeducators, to all our school staff. Thank you so much for what you continue to do every day.
I would say a story is more motivating than statistics, but that doesn't mean that you can't give a 20-word story and then the statistics to back it up.
Okay. Being a Chicagoan, I have great stories about gun control.
Big fan. And I will say some of the more productive conversations I've had with some of the folks I sit around on the floor have been about all the services the AEAs provide, including professional development, that they just aren't aware of.
Thanks.
You were in Chicago. Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Cubs or White Sox?
Southsider,
Oh,
White
no.
Sox, all you people up here are Cubs.
Okay, well,
Because
We're
it's
smarter
a pretty part
here.
of Chicago.
I agree with you on education, though, so we'll keep it that way. And I don't want to sound extreme like the other team is at times, but honest to gosh, I think there's a number of House Republicans that are education arsonists. Okay. They have spent years burning down the system. What they've done, and go back to comment, they've had control, at least 2/3 control of public education since 2010, and all control for the last 8, 10 years, whatever it is. But it's amazing that you can start the fire in the back of the building and then run out to the front and pretend like you're the damn hero. We're going to rescue the education system. Well, you're the same one that burnt the damn thing down. So until we get the respect we need for public education and the fact that education is not indoctrination, because that is a word we hear a lot, then it's going to be a little tough to change the direction. But it's 2024, it's an election year, it's a great year to change the direction for Iowa.
They should come into the schools. I know legislators in Illinois would do that and be principal for a day. It'd be great to see them do that.
I just want to add really
They should
quickly
be a para for a day.
a glimmer of hope, which is we had elections last November in 2023, and what Iowans resolutely told us all over the state is they believe in public education. They wanted candidates who were going to focus on providing quality education to students. The extremist group Moms for Liberty endorsed 13 candidates in the state. 1 out of 13 won, despite a huge amount of money poured in by groups from places like Florida. And I think that was really powerful. And it's not just in Iowa City. I mean, we're talking Carroll, Iowa, where Iowans said, no, we want quality public education. And so we know where Iowans stand on this, and it's time for our state government to reflect that too.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and all the help.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, even though you're a White Sox fan.
I want to start off by saying thank you for the support that you have shared about regarding specifically the AEAs. I am the parent of a child receiving early access services here with Grantwood AEA, and I'm also a speech and language pathologist with Mississippi Bend AEA. I work with a lot of preschool students that come in from our early access services, and it seemed with the original bill proposal that early access was very much an afterthought. Our children deserve to be more than an afterthought. And my concern is, or my question is, are there updates to what the plan is with early access services?
We've been waiting 10 days, still haven't seen the updates.
I've heard various things from like maybe a plan to move towards like Department of Health and Human Services versus staying with the AEAs. My concern is that with the children that are in the system already, especially, that if there's major changes and we don't really have a clear plan, that we're going to lose track of some of those kids and lose track of some of those services. And yeah, I don't know, that's just my overall concern.
On a very positive note, I don't think I'm going to be invited back to the governor's office for the second round of discussion. But through friends and people we work with on the other side of the aisle, the original proposal had maybe 5 or 7 Republican supporters in the House. So I think the governor has quite a long ways to go in any format with this bill. I don't want to get your hopes up, but I do think there is some common sense winding its way through the House chambers.
There has yet been no subcommittee scheduled on either side of the Capitol on this. And one thing that I've heard the governor continue to focus on that I think is also really important for us to focus on, and I think that you've raised it, is keep them local. We don't need more centralized, unaccountable government. We need the area education agencies local, where they can deal with local kids whom they know in districts that they know in an effective way.
Could you maybe just do us a favor, and you can use some of my 2 minutes to tell the audience here a little bit more about the work you do day in, day out?
Sure. As a speech and language pathologist, I work with speech and language pathologists throughout our AEAs, work with kids from birth all the way up through 21. And my specific position right now is working with students from preschool through 4th grade at a school district. And we support kids. We start by, we might see them coming in from early access, where we work together with the team that's working with the families at the start, and we work together to make sure that they have an IEP when they turn 3, if they need those services. So we
Can you explain what an IEP is?
Sure. An IEP is an individualized education program. So we make sure that what the child needs when they start school at 3 years old is what they get at the school. And we work together with that early access team that started already working with the family, to make sure that the school is prepared and ready to go for when that child starts school. Children are eligible, if they're eligible for an IEP, they're able to start school at 3 years old. And we make sure that that timeline happens so that they truly can start, even if it's in the middle of the school year, they start school at 3 years old if they qualify for an IEP. And they were already in the early access program.
And you work in both urban and rural areas?
Currently, I'm in West Liberty School District.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anne.
Hi, I just want to make a comment on behalf of probably 90% of the people who teach college students. Over the years, I've taught thousands of students, undergraduate, graduate law students. And if I could have indoctrinated them, it would have been on 2 things. 1, come to class and do the readings, and 2, check the syllabus before you email me at midnight to find out when the exam is. So I never, anyway, I just roll my eyes, and I've wanted to say that to someone for years.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's, first of all, obviously preaching to the choir. Second of all, there's a level of fear, right, that is motivating the Republican Party in what's going on with higher education, right? Because this isn't happening only in Iowa. This is happening all over the United States. And I think even globally, you're seeing a lot of right-wing parties have this kind of similar approach towards higher education. And so I do think it behooves us, as people who believe in higher education and as people who are in kind of left-wing parties across the world, to think about, okay, what is going on that is actually animating this concern. It's also just, it's a reality that people with college educations used to be much more likely to support Republican candidates. And that's changed over the last 20 years. I mean, and that's having really profound implications for our party. And so I think for all of us, trying to understand, what is it that is really motivating that fear is important. And understanding that, again, going back to the comment, I made earlier, this is not necessarily something that these folks were reasoned into. And so it may not be something that they're gonna be reasoned out of. We got to speak to that emotional, more fundamental concern that's out there rather than just trying to make an appropriate tongue-in-cheek point. So.
Hi guys, I'm Siri Felker. I teach at City High School and I work with Brady at the Iowa City Teachers Association. And my question goes back to the vouchers. And I think it was our ISEA lobbyist who introduced me first to the phrase polish a turd. And I've used it so much since then. And I hear you saying, Zach, that there's the potential we use this to essentially take the legislation on vouchers and say we're going to try to increase access in a way that gets childcare, and I appreciate that. But I'm also wondering, teachers really had a good day when we learned that there was an injunction on the book banning on, what was it, 496. And one of my students was quoted in an Iowa City Press Citizen article, and it was so powerful to me, and I can't help but wondering whether there's any hope that, given the racist origins, the discriminatory origins of school vouchers and their efforts to segregate our communities, is there hope for legal action against that?
Thank you.
Against vouchers in particular?
Yes. Especially just given that we have the data now of who's using them and of the schools raising their tuition. I mean, we know what happened.
Look, it should be on the table and it should be explored, right? Because Iowa students are guaranteed a right to a quality education, in our Constitution, and it's obviously something that's very fundamental. I'm not personally aware of any litigation that's been filed or is being prepared to be filed. The SF 496, in terms of the book banning, was something where there was a much narrower claim about the constitutionality. It's certainly worth exploring, but I'm serious, I'm not aware of anything at this point. Yeah. But every option should be on the table. And by the way, while I certainly hear that expression, and for what it's worth, the strategy around preventing vouchers from becoming law, obviously it didn't work, and so now we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what do we do, whether it's providing more accountability to actually provide the data that you're speaking to, whether it's legal action. Kids got to come first, not just this ideological point.
Yeah, for those of you who may not know, I think what you're referring to, Siri, is the origins of 1950s post-Brown versus education, and the segregation academies that were created across Virginia in particular, so that and they funded poor white parents so they could send their kids there and not have to send them to integrated schools.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Next question.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. A lot of times the city governments or county governments can't do certain things because the state will pass laws saying, you can't do that. We've tried to pass a minimum wage increase in the county, and the state said, you can't do that. They passed a law making that. Recently, this is what I've read, that there's a universal basic income pilot program, I think, in this county, I believe. And now they're trying to pass a law saying that we can't do that, or you can't do that anywhere in the state. And I'm tired of Des Moines trying to interfere with what we want to do or whatever. So anybody want to speak about that?
So are we.
Yeah, I mean, as a former mayor and Dave, a former city council member, I think local control is one of our top priorities. We've seen the erosion of local control every year since I started, so for 8 years, and it started with making sure counties couldn't raise their own minimum wage, and it's gotten to soil erosion measures, And it's just, it's ridiculous that the party that's supposed to be all about local control and no interference of higher forms of government is all about controlling what our cities, mainly our larger cities and counties can and can't do.
And it's really frustrating to listen to a representative from Denison, Iowa, tell us what we can't do in Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin area. It's just ridiculous. And I'm not downgrading the town in western Iowa, but he has plenty of work to do there. He doesn't need to worry about us.
We have home rule in the Iowa Constitution thanks to Bill Supel in large part. And so we continue to fight for it every day.
Thank you. Next question.
To share a personal story about speech pathologists and what they do in schools, I'm an ugly crier, so I'm going to share the impact that they had on my life. 2 weeks before school started, my kid came down with a seizure disorder and completely lost his ability to talk and communicate, like even to point to things. If it was not for the speech pathologist, he would have no means of communication. They taught him how to use augmentative communication, which is an electronic device. He was headbanging every night, biting himself, eating rocks. He was just so frustrated. He didn't know how to say his name. He didn't know how to play with his toys. As an educator, I don't know what I would have done if this kid was in my class. I could not teach because it was that disruptive. And with their training in AEA, it was amazing. And if it's taken away, the waiting lists to receive this help is like 3 years. I'm blessed because I live here. But if you're from a small community with a desert of resources, I can't even fathom what these poor folks go through. They are so needed. Please, please support these resources. If it wasn't for them, I don't know where my family would be right now. Seriously. Sorry.
Thank you. I think those are the kinds of.
Thank you.
I think it's very important that people see just how important these services, how this affects individuals, and it's a very, very moving story and a very important story. And I want to say, unfortunately, there's a lot of those out there in rural Iowa where they're going to get hit the hardest by this. Because as Alana pointed out, she is lucky that she lives here in Johnson County because we do have better access to things. But our friend in Denison, Iowa, who has his own stuff to worry about, his kids, the kids in his school districts are going to be the most affected by something like this. So,
yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And Dave talked about some of the lies from the governor's office. I think the lie number one is the private sector can do this better. Because what we know is that AEAs, area education agencies, provide the scale to make sure that Iowa City, Cedar Rapids can team up with the rural communities, make sure every kid has access to the services. And what we know is going to happen for especially rural kids if this legislation goes through is instead of a speech-language pathologist coming to their school from the Grantwood AEA, their school might be paying $250, $300 an hour for some online private service, and that's just obviously a downgrade.
Thank you. Next question.
I'm a little short. So, my name is Gina Rogers. I'm a digital learning consultant at Grantwood AEA. Hey, John. Shout out to you. I work with teachers on integrating technology in the classroom. A lot of the work that I do is supporting learners that have a difficulty accessing text. And so I introduce teachers to screen readers, which obviously it would have been a support that your brother would have benefited from. Many of our kids are special education kids that we support, but we do also support all kids. And I would like to make the point that all students, or special education students, are general education students first and foremost. I guess this bill is being passed through or being considered under the guise that we are failing special education students and it's going to close the gap somehow if we remove these services or make them more privatized. I'm just wondering, do you feel like this will in fact do that, or is this a way to divert money to a different place?
I mean, yeah, it probably will divert money to a different place.
Honest opinion, it's a way to cut taxpayer-funded programs.
We heard a very similar argument last year when there was the big government reorganization about some of the changes to vocational rehab. And Representative Nielsen and I on the state government committee really dug in and fought on that one. Unfortunately, they still passed it. And what we've already seen this year, it's been 6 months?
Yeah.
And there's a wait list for the first time for vocational rehab services, which kids really rely on. And, you imagine a senior in high school and they're on a wait list. That's really scary. And so I don't have faith in this governor and her consultants that she uses from out of state.
It's the same consultant that did the AEA bill that did the reorg. Mhm.
I mean, Gina, fundamentally, this is about the value of public education, right? You've got people up here who believe in it. You got people in this room who believe in it. You got professionals like you and your team at Grantwood AEA who believe in it. You've got a governor and a majority party in the state who do not believe in it, who do not believe in the value of public education. They believe it should be the people who can afford it, get it, and people who can't, tough luck. And just a difference in worldview. And so I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're reaching out to people who are going to be affected by the service cuts. We've just heard, we're hearing story after story about how important these services are and the difference that they make in people's lives. And by raising up those stories, I think that you're going to be able to help stop some of the worst parts of this proposal from becoming law and ultimately elect people who actually agree with us and believe in the value of public education.
I read a story on this floor this week from a pediatric nurse who sees 50 to 100 kids a day and sees the difference that the AEAs make in their lives from day one.
It's a diversion, both literally and figuratively. And frankly, what they're trying to come after is it's $68 million in the property tax levy, 62 to 68, which, by the way, if that's the levy within the Grantwood AEA, that's local. We're paying for our kids to get your services because we made that decision and we're happy with it. It's none of the governors or anyone from Denison's darn business.
Thank you. Next question.
I do have a question, but my name is Mark Priest. First, I want to give a testimonial to AEAs. Both of my kids teach school in Iowa. One needed AEAs to help him with his lisp when he was in kindergarten. The other one, when we were in an uncertified school in Iowa, they had no what was then called talented and gifted. I think it's now enriched learning plans. My wife and I went to the AEA to get trained so we could bring that program to that school. Now my question. Chris McCarville, president of Xavier High School, in his article in the Gazette this morning, pulled down the mask so everybody could see that these vouchers protect Christian nationalism. I want to know what you guys will do, and now I'm speaking as a representative in part from the Interfaith Alliance in Iowa. What can you do to get in the way of this Christian nationalism that's a scourge in our nation and our state? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. One of the conversations we had during this voucher debate, I mean, it's uncomfortable to talk about, but I'm Jewish. Senator Weiner is Jewish. Before we were elected, Representative Levin, there hadn't been a Jew in the legislature in 30 years. There are schools in Iowa receiving voucher money that part of their application process is to provide references that the parents of the student accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. I just don't think that should be the role of the government. I think people have every right to form religious schools, to be a part of a church. You know, we live in a country based on freedom of religion. But I am deeply uncomfortable with sending tax dollars to a school that might reject someone of my faith based on religion. I just think that's wrong.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
I was going to say, it just comes back to we need you guys to mobilize, speak out, vote. You know, we need every Democrat in Johnson County to make sure that they're voting and also going out and getting 5 others from another county to vote. It's just so important. You know, we do what we can. We're all in minorities that, you know, we've told them that the vouchers was going to be a bad idea and that it was going to cost more than they were, you know, suggesting. When we told them that the reorganization bill was going to cause problems, and it is, and you know, the most important voice is yours. So make sure that you go out and take your funds and use it.
We also make efforts to get outside of, you know, we get accused a lot of being in a bubble here in Johnson County, and I know all 6 of us up here, if you check our social media, we make great efforts to get outside the bubble and talk to folks, whoever will talk to us, to hear from them. I mean, just last week, I had a really great conversation with a pastor from, I'm going to forget exactly which, but from Henry County, who's particularly concerned about the bill that would put chaplains in our public schools. Yeah, as a non-religious ethnic Jew, it's a little scary, but also I feel like it gives me the opportunity to ask questions like, well, would you want me to choose the chaplain who's coming to your school? Because I'm guessing you want you to choose. But that's not how this works in our civil society. We have freedom of religion, and we have the separation of church and state. And so just trying to have as many conversations as we can inside and outside the bubble.
Thank you for bringing up that editorial. I read it the first time, and I slammed it down on the island and said, "What the heck?" And then I opened it up again. I go, "What the heck?"
Yeah.
He's actually saying what people are thinking, and now if people do the same thing and read that editorial more than once, you'll really hear what he was saying. And I think as many people will be disgusted as like to hear what he's saying. And I'm an old St. Joe's Elementary School boy from up in the Marion, Iowa, and family that went through Xavier. I will say this, I don't want to speak for my brother, but he is very unhappy with their system now and very unhappy with vouchers. As a parent who sent his kids to Xavier, and as his wife taught there for years before, she said, wait, this isn't the direction I want our kids to go in, and she left. But I'm glad he sent that editorial in. Now we have something to point to. It's not me being paranoid just because everyone's against me. It's me because this is true. What they're saying, sometimes you have to believe what they're telling you.
What we saw the entire last session, and that included vouchers, was basically a push against anyone who didn't look like them or think like them or have the same religion as many of them do. And I continue to object to putting public dollars into mostly religious schools, many of which might not be viable were they not getting the infusion of public dollars now. I think it's highly inappropriate. We'll continue to look for ways to highlight that and see where, despite what has happened in the courts, to talk to people and to the ACLU and others about where legal challenges may be possible.
I haven't read the editorial yet, so now I really want to. Clearly not fired up enough this morning. But look, Reverend, as you well know, and as your son Matt knows, politics is about power, right? It's about who has it, How do you use it? What are you using it for? And we are seeing very clearly what Republicans are using their political power for. It's to advance a radical agenda that excludes a lot of people, including many of the people in this room and on this panel. And I think the real question is, what are we going to do to rebuild our political power, to take it back from these people who are trying to exclude more and more people from the social fabric of our society? And I know that you and Leslie, and I know many of the people in this room are actively engaged in that, but fundamentally, that is what we have to do in order to stop the advancement of this ideology that is so dangerous to so many people who we call our fellow citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Thank you.
And then Final Jeopardy.
Good morning. I'm Galen Wobetter, a member of the Johnson County League. First of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. You people help me keep faith in Iowa when it's really hard, and I so appreciate all of your knowledge and efforts. I have a question about the AEA, and I am very much for public education and everything. But I watched the governor a week ago Friday night on Iowa Press, and one of the things she said about the AEA, I thought, was something worth considering. And if we're going to be against this effort, we need to be able to counter what she's saying. And this rang a little true with me because I'd been an educator for a long time. And she said the salaries of the top people at the AEAs are really out of balance. $350,000 top dog gets, and some of the others a lot. It's kind of what her contention was, and I think there might be some truth to this, is the AEAs are top heavy with administrators rather than the people like we've seen here today that are actually doing the work with the students. So I'd like to hear what you think about that and your responses, please.
Well, I'm happy to sit down and have that discussion. Anytime the governor wants to talk facts, wants to talk numbers, then let's sit down in any one of the committees. It could be government oversight. And we can have the AEA directors or administrators come in. We can look at charts and see exactly if and where they are in terms of pay scale. But this is the same playbook that I heard 8 years ago, because 8 years ago we were going after school superintendents, because school superintendents were making 5 times as much as a teacher. Our school superintendents, and they're too admin heavy. So it's the same playbook. They just move from the local school districts to the AEAs.
But do you think, Dave, there's some truth to what that allegation? I mean, let's be honest about it.
I think there's one AEA that might be top heavy from what little I know. But I can tell you this from the AEA administrators I know, they'll say, we'll open the books. And that's what we really need. Let's open the books. We'll see who's where. Is there too many administrators? Is there not enough frontline people? But I don't see it near or anywhere near the extent that the governor just hasn't been honest about this from the start. Yeah. So it's she also told me in that meeting that, as I said earlier, there's a complete war going on. Yeah. They're at each other's throats. So I called a handful of them up, of AEA administrators and school districts. And their response was, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Huh? So it's real hard to work with someone from that starting block premise. But everyone should be under review. Tax credit should be under a review. Everything should be under a legislative review.
Okay. And I think it's important to zoom out, the way that our area education agencies are managed. They represent multiple school districts. So proportionally based on the population of each school district, our elected school board members choose to send representatives to the boards of these area education agencies where they have oversight over these sorts of issues. The governor's preference would be to move all that money and all that oversight into her office. And what we've seen she does with that in her office, like was mentioned earlier with the federal COVID money, is she uses it to give huge raises to people in her cabinet, many of whom are people coming straight out of lobbying for things like the private school industry.
Oh, sorry, Janice, go ahead.
My understanding is everybody is open to a conversation with all the AEA folks I've talked to. I also understand that the highest paid administrator is about to retire. And there's a reason that somebody becomes highly paid over many years with many degrees. But let's not lay blame. Let's have a conversation.
One quick thing I would just mention, and one thing the governor didn't mention when she was on Iowa Press, was that there is already today a limit on the amount of money that can be spent on administration in our public education system. That limit is 5%. No more than 5% of your total expenditure, whether it's an AEA, public school, what have you, can be spent on administration. And to my knowledge, every single AEA in the state is currently underneath that 5% threshold. And so if we're going to have an intellectually honest conversation, the governor should at least start by acknowledging that currently, despite her accusations, all the AEAs in the state are in fact fully compliant with current law. If we want to change that law and go from 5% to 4%, then we can have that conversation, but she shouldn't be implying or suggesting that currently AEA compensation for administrators is out of bounds with current law that's currently in place.
Yeah.
So I think that's just an important piece of context that she didn't want people to know who are watching Iowa.
Yes, that is a red herring. If she wanted to do that, we would do that. That's not what we're doing. That's not what this bill would do.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Hello. I'm Miriam Timmer Hackert with the League of Women Voters and an Iowa City Community School District parent. And nobody's brought up the book ban. My understanding is that there's a federal injunction now, but it's probably going to the Supreme Court. And do you guys have a guess as to what will happen when it goes to the Supreme Court?
I'm not a lawyer.
It has to go through, it actually has to be heard in district court first.
Oh, okay.
And my take as an actual trained lawyer, although I'm not necessarily a constitutional lawyer, is, and we told them this on the floor, that the language they used was so vague that it would never pass constitutional muster. If they want to ban obscenity, then say it.
Also, I will just mention that the ICC-SD books that had been removed from classrooms, at least as long as the injunction is in place, are being returned to the libraries and classrooms, which I'm very happy to hear.
And stop by the Iowa City Public Library and thank the librarians for all the work that they did, which led to the Penguin House lawsuit, which is how we got this injunction in the first place, especially Sam. They did a really amazing job of bringing up all of the problems and the good arguments. So
we also have local families in the Iowa City community who were litigants in that.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We answered those questions so quickly that I know there was one other person who is in line. If you would like to come up and ask your question. We're being so efficient today that we'll give you an opportunity to ask.
Dave might have to wear a tie every time.
That formality helps.
And it's Saturday.
I'm Anne Marie Krause. I was a teacher librarian in the Iowa City Schools for 26 years. I just read this morning in the paper that the governor is cooking up a revision of reading curriculum in the public schools based on the science of reading. Now, I am not knocking the science of reading because my daughter is in her 16th year as a very gifted first grade teacher who can take the most struggling reader and turn them into a reader. And she's told me in the past that the science of reading is very valid and crucial to the teaching of reading. So on the face of it, it sounds good, except I want to know where's the catch and one criticism has been that other strategies for teaching reading would no longer be allowed or whatever, and that it's a one-size-fits-all. And I guess it's not a bill quite yet, but I'm just wondering if you know anything about that.
That'd be the first time the governor actually believed in a science, I think. So,
As a previous public educator and current writing tutor, you need a variety of strategies to reach all students. And so while the science of reading is an excellent, excellent strategy, telling teachers you can only use this tool, not a great idea.
also requiring them to do a certain number of hours of education and take a test, which is another unfunded mandate, probably not a great idea either.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks to all of you for your questions, very perceptive questions and answers. We appreciate your responses. We're going to turn now to some closing remarks on the part of our legislators. Again, 3 minutes is the rule for your closing remarks, and we will begin with you, Zach.
All right. Well, look, this is a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much to everybody for taking time out of your weekend to be here and to spend some time with us this morning, sharing your stories and asking great questions. As I mentioned, in one of the questions, I think the one that Reverend Priest asked, I think the fundamental question that I have for all of us is kind of what do we go, there's so much frustration and disagreement with the direction that Republicans are taking our state. If you share that frustration, you share that disagreement, I hope that you'll join us in building power to try and get our state back on track. There's an enormous amount of work that is happening right here in Johnson County to try to make sure that we're able to do that. And if you have any interest, if you're not already involved in joining that work, please just contact any of us, and we'd be happy to get you more involved in that. Until then, we hope to see you next month. Continue to ask our Republican colleagues, impress upon our Republican colleagues how important it is that they show up and they answer questions, hard questions from their constituents, rather than being cowardly and not showing up.
Janice?
Thank you again all for coming. Thank you for your stories. Please continue to tell your stories, individual stories, to individual legislators. In a perverse sort of way, I'm grateful that this AEA issue has been brought up, because we across the state have now learned an enormous amount about the full breadth and depth of the services that AEAs provide all around the state. And the incredible services that also extend to crisis management. They were in Perry starting the day of that horrible tragedy there, and they are still there. So thank you, and continue to tell your stories. I would echo what Zach said. If you or know other people who want to, please come to our listening post tomorrow at 2 p.m. At the North Liberty Public Library, specifically on AEAs, so we can listen and people can tell their stories. Apropos of nothing other than this is the day, today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's the 79th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
Thank you so much for the forum and the questions and the direct questions on what we think AEAs, book banning, and child care issues. I do want to mention for everyone that watches this that the forum for AEAs tomorrow, January 28th, just so people know it's Sunday the 28th, and so people don't show up on the following Sunday, though I'm sure we could show up but it's the 28th at 2 o'clock at the North Liberty Public Library. Everyone here is open for items of improvement. Any of the discussions we've talked about, there are areas we can improve. It just takes that discussion and will to do it, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, thank you all for your engagement, your advocacy, and your thoughtfulness. There was one thing I didn't mention earlier, which is on my kind of tiered list of advocacy efforts. Up toward the top should be letting your friends and family know that you're speaking up so that they do too. Especially for those who have friends and family. If you're reaching out to your local legislator and you know someone who lives in a different district or a different congressional district, a different Senate district, a different House district, a different part of the state, everyone is served by our governor. We are all constituents of our governor. But by legally speaking, we are all the constituents of our governor, and all therefore have a direct right to advocate to our governor. But those direct addresses from our constituents, from our districts, are always going to be more powerful for those of us in the House and the Senate. So let your friends and family know what you're speaking up about, and if you want them to get their voices in the mix too.
Absolutely. And just again, thank you all for showing up. And I think, Galen, you said that, we help provide you with a little bit of hope for how the state is going. Well, right back at you, kid. Every single one of you in here that shows up on a Saturday morning to ask us these questions and reach out and do the advocacy work and everything that you all do, it really means a lot to us. And we don't always get the opportunity to maybe send a note back or just let you know. Maybe we're just answering a question quick to your email, but you guys are really an amazing source of energy and inspiration for all of us. And your stories change us, and it changes the way we advocate for you. So thank you so much for all your sharing and for being here.
Yeah, thank you to the league, and thanks to everyone for being here. I just want to zoom way back to an hour and a half ago when we all talked about what we're working on. And I just want everyone to know, I mean, we have affirmative visions for what this state can look like and how we can improve the lives of everyday Iowans. Our Iowa House Democrats Caucus is laser focused on lowering costs for Iowa families in this moment when we know that's a major problem in ensuring the right to reproductive freedom and investing big in public education and legalizing marijuana. And so none of us go up there just to fight with the Republicans. And it's not a yes or no question on all of these horrible proposals they've brought forth that we talked about today. There really is another vision where we come to these forums and talk about the great work we're doing, and maybe some of you will have some criticisms of how we're improving the lives of Iowans and working on these priorities. And I know we can get there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, let's give some applause to our. Thanks for all your efforts and your time that you're spending on our behalf and giving up your weekend times. I have a couple of more closing remarks that I'd like to make. First, I'd like to thank our local television staff for recording today and for live streaming on the League's Facebook page. Rebroadcasts of this forum will be run on Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV. And you can see their respective programming for when that will happen. And thanks, Dave, for reminding us that people might watch after tomorrow. So, our next forum will be on February 24th from 9:30 again to 11:30 here at the Center Assembly Room, and the topic for that will be healthcare. So that's another pretty big and pretty complex topics that we'll be addressing. And I believe that Jean Bancroft has.
Just a quick announcement. I've heard many of you talk about how do I advocate? How do I, and you have given great advice for that. But I have one other piece of advice, and that is join the League of Women Voters, because honestly, we have a group of people who work on advocacy, and they track the bills and then come together with some talking points so that you can write your legislators and don't have to do all the back work yourself. And so I just want to encourage you, everyone in here is eligible to join. I have forms if you are interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. So you think we're all over 6?
And Roger said, if you want to stay and help put up chairs, that would be nice.
And go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.